how do our brains keep us from forming new habits? Let's talk about that. Welcome to the series. I'm Alicia and I'm so glad you're here. Before we get started, I've got to remind you to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss anything from this video course. Remember that the additional materials from this course are only in the email, so you've got to sign up at mindovermunch.com/foodfreedom if you want all of those goodies. Of course, the videos are here every day on YouTube, but in your email you get the link. Okay, so today we're talking about habits. We think of habits as they relate to, health or lifestyle behaviors. So the habit of exercising, making your bed, brushing your teeth, eating healthy, but really everything we do is a habit. So a habit, the definition of a habit, is a settled or regular tendency or practice, especially one that is hard to give up. Wouldn't it be great if eating healthy and exercising were regular practices that were hard to give up? I mean, really, what we think of as habits are what we want to be our habits. But what our habits are now are actually how we act right now. So all of our experiences that we've ever had condition us, and these create our habits. So our childhood, our parents, our friends, our activities, our schools, our interactions, everything affects how we grow and who and what we become. This is called conditioning, which is defined as the process of training a person or animal to behave in a certain way. We condition our dogs, for instance, when we train them. If you're familiar with dog training books, they use that word a lot. We become conditioned by our experiences, and this is called social conditioning. Now, we don't ask or choose this conditioning. It just happens. Now, our brains, everybody's loving the artwork in this series. No, it's a brain. Everybody's loving the artwork in this series. Brains? Does it look like a brain? So our brains evolutionarily, our brains go toward the good and away from the bad. So, in the caveman days, we would go toward the food and away from the predators. This is how our brain works. Something happens and we respond or react to it in some way, and then our brains keep going toward what's familiar, what we've done before, what served us, what's good. Now, there's no objective good and bad. This is just all based on our experience. Now, so this adds up and up and up and creates all of our patterns in existence, and some of these serve us and some of these don't. Some of these are intentional and some of them aren't. So if you take the example of dogs, behaviors that they've gotten from past conditioning, if you rescue a dog, for instance, it has all of its conditioned behaviors. We can intentionally train that dog to have new conditioning. Now, it's gonna be harder based on how old the dog is, how much conditioning has it experienced. It's the same with us humans. All right, so brushing your teeth, for instance, it's a habit that can be intentional, that is intentional, and it serves us. The habit of exercise is intentional and it serves us. Now, the habit of turning to ice cream or any food when we're stressed out, typically unintentional and also does not serve us. The habit of not talking about our feelings or thinking about them, typically unintentional and does not serve us. The reason you can develop new habits though, the reason that you are capable of training your brain is because of neuroplasticity, which essentially means the wiring and connections of your brain can reshape and reform in response to learning or experience. So pretty much you're not stuck with what you've got. If I want to establish the new habit of doing the dishes every single day. Now, right now, what's familiar to my brain is not doing the dishes, but I can set intentions and get myself to do them more often. Maybe I use a weekly or monthly resolution or whatever system you want to use. You train the brain to do it again and again and again until eventually the new habit replaces the old. You really have to outsmart your brain from going toward what it's used to going toward and away from what it's used to avoiding. The way that this works can be shown through a habit loop. So a habit loop is mapped out as the trigger, the behavior, behavior and the reward. And it's a loop because it continues, right? So the trigger is the stimulus. This is what gets you to do something. The behavior is what you actually do, and then the reward, which can also be the result. Reward kind of implies good, but when it comes to habit loops, the reward that we get from this loop is sometimes just a result. It can be positive or negative. So as an example, let's say the trigger is a donut. The behavior is
I eat the donut.
the reward is, it could be,
I enjoy the donut.
or it could result in
Some judgment.
right? It could be, I eat the donut and I feel really bad about myself. And then I feel so bad about myself that I just continue the loop, right? The reward or result also could be, depending on how many donuts I eat and how short amount of time, I gain weight like I did in college.
With all the Krispy Kreme that I ate.
My experience in college, which I talked about in the first video, the trigger was I was biking home from school and lived across from a Krispy Kreme. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. This is the bad news about habits. So biking by the Krispy Kreme every day made it, the trigger was there. Oh, hot and fresh now.
I need it.
And then the behavior is go in and buy 1 or 2 dozen, because they'll often have the deal where you get buy the second dozen, get it, whatever off.
At least they did like 10 years ago.
And then the reward or the result is I binge eat all of them on my Friday night.
Alone.
And then I do it again every Friday night. It can be helpful to look at our behaviors as a part of this loop to see what's the trigger, what's the reward, what's the result. We can set up new habit loops too by deciding what a trigger will be. So if I want to start exercising every morning, you've probably heard the tip, keep your shoes by your bedside, because then it's a trigger. If it's there to remind me, maybe I'm more likely to do it. We have to outsmart our brains. Now, we also need the reward part. We need to set this up if we want to establish new habits. Now, is, the reward of feeling good after exercising really enough? For some people it might be, but for most people, they're probably gonna need something more. I know for me, I don't feel good every single time I work out. Sometimes I feel bad, Sometimes I feel good and it's great, but that's not really the reason I do it. So you could set up some other reward. I know some people are like, they have a system. It's a system essentially where after their workout, they have an iced tea, or, maybe we don't wanna go with compensating food and exercise, but maybe you have a self-care bath, or after a certain amount of workouts, you get a new pair of shoes or whatever. The point of this video is not to teach you how to create the habits, but to understand the nature of the mind. Rather than looking to others to tell you how to build your habits, you can do what is going to really work for your brain. Someone else's conditioning and all of their habit loops are going to be different than yours. They're going to need different triggers and different rewards and results. Our nature is to go toward the good, the familiar, and stay away from the bad or the unknown. So you've got to know what that is for you. As you know, a lot of times our goals and dreams are in that unknown. We need to go toward it. So we need to train our minds to be more okay with being uncomfortable, with being in that unknown. And when we take a look at our patterns, our habits, our habit loops, and we see what's serving us and what's not, we decide to make changes, and then we challenge our brain's innate tendency. And it actually grows the brain physiologically. It changes from it for the better. Now, meditation is another way that we can practice rewriting our conditioning. We sit still, we commit to being there for a certain amount of time, and then the thoughts come. And the nature of the mind is to go toward the thought, to get lost in it. You're human, it happens to all of us. But we challenge the nature of the mind by just going, okay, I'm just gonna bring it back to the breath. And we do it again and again and again. And we have to really do this through felt experience, not just intellectually like, oh yeah, I get it, and now it's done. We have to spend the time rewiring our brain. We have to live with an embodied understanding that the discomfort is okay, it's bearable. Maybe it's, I'm meditating, I have a pain in my knee, can I just sit with it can I respond rather than react? Oh, maybe I'm bored, maybe I'm irritated. Can we sit with that uncomfortable feeling? And by choosing to keep sitting here when I meditate and respond instead of reacting, I rewrite the habit loop to become more okay with the discomfort. We see that meditation actually affects our brains not just through the lived experience, but through the studies where they've scanned brains of meditators and seen the neuroplastic changes occur. So I have shared a couple of guided meditations in last week's video, and I'm gonna have another one today. Remember, at mindovermunch.com/foodfreedom, you can sign up for those emails. They are free. But the takeaway here is there's nothing wrong with you if you're struggling to make these big lifestyle changes. It is the nature of our minds to keep doing what we've been doing and to resist what we haven't done before. We can't fight the nature of our minds. We can't change that fact, but we can learn to work with it. Our brains go toward what's familiar and we outsmart it. But we must see our current habits clearly to make that change. A lot of times we get caught up trying to see ourselves as we wish we were, rather than as we are right now. And we have to meet ourselves here, now, in this present moment, and see the pattern for what it is before we can rewrite the conditioning. This is mindfulness. This is the practice of non-judgmental awareness of the present moment. I can see my habits, my conditioning, and really understand what is serving me and what isn't. And the more I'm willing to look, the less scary it becomes. And that's when it really starts to feel like we're making sustainable progress toward our goals. I actually find I get excited to see what I need to work on because it starts to serve me. The only way we can make change and get more of what we want is by learning to be okay in that discomfort, and it's not gonna happen overnight. Okay, so I know, again, a lot to take in today and in this week in this series, but I hope that you're digesting it a little at a time. I ask that you share in the comments, what do you do to build new habits? Now that we understand the nature of the mind, what are some of the systems you've set up that work for you? A reminder, if you're finding this series helpful and you would like to give a donation because we have created this content for free, there is a donation page linked below. No obligation. The free content is going to keep coming, but it really helps us be able to create high quality content regularly with your help. Also, I ask if you found this video helpful or any video in this series, share it with someone or share the series on your social media, because that's the best way to spread the word that, peace with food is possible. We can do it together. And remember all along the way that it really is a matter of mind over munch.
Ah.